Hey, this is Dr. Katie Nichols. Before we get started on this podcast with the Growth Project, just want to give you a opportunity that we have coming up. We have a mental skills training camp where we're going to be exploring some of the basic foundations of focus, being able to quiet the mind, quiet the body, and being able to goal set and focus on that process. So when you get a chance, take a look at it at our website, or for more information about when those dates are this summer, email info@synergyperformancesc.com.
Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by Synergy Performance. Our mission with this podcast is to explore the topics of growth, performance, and personal development through conversations with individuals pursuing success, and by using current events in business and sports to discuss strategies on how you can grow into the individual that you want to be.
Welcome back to the Growth Project. Thanks for tuning in. This is Dr. Katie Nichols, and this month, for the month of June, we are talking failure and adversity. As you may know, for the year of 2019, we're going with a different topic for each month. So this month, we're talking failure and adversity, and I think that you'll see throughout this month that the theme throughout the episodes really both talk about the challenge and the hardship of adversity and failure, and also the opportunity for growth. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I am very fortunate to be with the head coach of Clemson women's basketball and the reigning ACC Coach of the Year, Ms. Amanda Butler. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Growth Project sounds like something I want to be part of, so I'm honored to be a guest here on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, we are honored to have you. So I guess first, to start off, if you want to just share a little bit about your background and what kind of led you to coaching and ultimately how you got here.
Jeez, that's a long story. I'll try to give you the condensed version, but I just really chalk up the fact that I grew up in an area and with parents that made girls athletics really important, and went to a high school where girls sports was really important, but grew up in Middle Tennessee and really just count that as a blessing, because I had a lot of role models in terms of high school athletes that were older than me, and my mom coached a little bit when I was younger. Some of my earliest memories, literally 4 years old, going to high school basketball games at Goullettsville High School, and how I idolized those girls. And obviously, as you get older, you look back on some of those things and you realize how formative that it was. And it wasn't just, fun or what, it just really shaped me and a lot of my interests and what I thought was cool, and, ideas of the teenager that I wanted to be, and set goals like playing college basketball. But being able to know people who did that was really powerful for me as a child.
Sure.
Given a lot of great opportunities, I think, along those lines, and somehow coaching was just always in me, whether I realized it or not. I thought for a while I was going to be a physical therapist, and pursued some things academically that just weren't as fulfilling as being on the court in some capacity, and just really blessed to have played for a woman who recognized that in me. Her name's Carol Ross. And so when I finally came to her and said, I don't know about this whole physical therapy thing, maybe I need to coach for a little while, get a master's degree or something, and try to figure it out. And she said, I remember very, very clearly, she said, well, I wondered when you were going to figure it out. And I was like, well, it sure would have helped if you would have just given me some insight sooner. But she gave me my first opportunity to coach at my alma mater at University of Florida. And then I had several others, just happened to be females, that were head coaches that hired me as an assistant. Susie Gardner, who's now the head coach at Mercer, and has just done a fantastic job there. And Katie Meyer, who was my head coach at UNC Charlotte. And then a very special woman named Judy Rose, who was the athletic director at UNC Charlotte, gave me my first opportunity to be a head coach at Charlotte when Katie became the head coach at Miami. And then Jeremy Foley was the athletic director at Florida, who gave me an opportunity to be the head coach at Florida. And then there was a change in that leadership, and then there was a change in who they wanted to be the women's basketball coach, and had an amazing year of growth myself by studying the men's game a lot. Spent a lot of time in the NBA with a lot of really very talented and also gracious and generous coaches with their programs and their access to their programs with me. And then Clemson came calling, and here we are.
Yep.
And it's really special place coming off of a really special season. And you obviously were part of it. You had a front row seat of an amazing group of women, a really special staff of people, and everybody just pulling in the same direction and making it work.
Yeah. So I guess for those that don't know, I worked as the mental performance coach for women's basketball. And I think to kind of take it back to that beginning stage before we had even met, I think, just reading the story and seeing the experience of, I've been fired from my alma mater. I've been fired from the place that I played. I took this year and really had this tremendous experience of growth and opportunity when, I don't know if everyone would have taken that path. I think that's credit to you and obviously the person that you are to take advantage of that kind of hardship. But that was something that just stuck out to me from the beginning when I read your story and read the article that you and Dr. Jana had written together.
Yeah.
But so walk me back through, what was that initial experience like to hear, okay, change of leadership, we're going a different direction. It's on your birthday, as I've come to learn.
Yeah, it's a cool part of the story.
Yeah.
Adds a little drama. Obviously there's disappointment in that, and that season in particular, my last season at Florida, we had a lot of adversity, and I felt like we had weathered it really well, and I felt really good about the job that we had done that year when they decided that I didn't need to be the head coach anymore. So I had a great deal of peace in terms of the staff and the team, and win-loss record really didn't reflect how many wins we had in that season. Yeah. And so I felt really good about the job that I'd done. And when that conversation went down, the first thing that I really experienced in terms of probably the most compelling thoughts were, all right, I'm this person who's been leading this program for 10 years now. And as having an opportunity to do that, in the midst of those 10 years, there's been all these young women and coaches that I've gotten a chance to work with that were on my staff. And there's been all these messages and these things that we said, this is who we want to be, and this is how we should compete, and this is how you handle your business like a woman, and all these other things that we really felt like were the guardrails of good behavior within our program, and that we felt like would lead to wins and championships and all those things that I think all of us as competitors aspire to achieve. And so it just became really clear to me really, really quickly, man, this is my biggest and best platform that I've had yet to really walk my talk. Because it's really easy to put a slogan on the locker room wall or, share a lesson at Breakfast of Champions when you're not in the midst of adversity or something, that people might perceive as embarrassing or, there's a lot of different ways, disappointing, a lot of different ways to look at it. But I don't know, just really quickly, I just thought, man, I'm a huge hypocrite if I've been running around here having these messages like, don't grow weary in doing good, Galatians 6:9, and you'll reap a harvest in due time if you do not give up. That was one of our big things. Handle your business like a woman, and those are two just real pillars in our program. And I thought this is to make that really real and meaningful. I have a chance to demonstrate what that looks like, not after a championship season or after things are going well or a kid coming back from an injury and trying to pep them up, but like in the face of what a lot of people would consider to be professionally the worst thing you can experience.
Right.
And so I knew that I had to reframe it really quickly as an opportunity. And whether any of those women that I had been preaching and teaching those type messages were paying attention or not, I felt, really compelled to be the example and try to live out what I'd asked them to do as competitors that I had a chance to coach.
Yeah, we talked last month about mental toughness, and just from a leadership perspective, if I want to build mental toughness on my team, really that's about the response to adversity and being able to model that sometimes for those that we're leading. So to me, that's a exemplary example of, hey, here's some adversity, and I need to choose the way that I want to respond that's consistent with what I'm preaching with my team as well.
Yeah, for sure. And to take it one step further, I think that self-awareness is something that we're really trying to do a good job of teaching in our program, and that obviously because you help us with that a great deal. But also as a as a person of faith, as a Christian, knew that this is another opportunity to demonstrate this is what a woman of faith, this is how she responds. And I really just didn't want anger, bitterness. I just didn't want I didn't have room for any of those emotions in my life. I really wanted to reframe it as an opportunity. And I think when you proclaim to live a life of faith, you can't be selective about when you choose to employ your faith. It's got to be there all the time.
For sure, definitely. Well, and even in that, it reminds me of early on in the year we were talking about core values and how that really becomes the foundation. If you're laying a foundation for a house, that really helps you weather that storm. Obviously faith being one of those for you. Like, what are some of the other core values that you feel like helped you weather that storm of, I've been fired, now what?
Well, I'm maybe a little bit of an adventurous spirit, and and I was really fortunate as well that I had a couple years left on my contract, and so there was no impending financial pressure to run out and get another job, and like I said, I had a great deal of peace about the fact that I thought we'd done a pretty good job. There were just some circumstances that were beyond our control.
Yeah.
And so I also didn't feel compelled to I got to run out and get another job and show everybody how good of a coach I am, to prove that Florida was wrong for firing me. I just didn't really feel any of that. Yeah. And so the adventurous spirit in me kind of started to look at it and go, wow, I had a couple years here where I can kind of do whatever I want to do. Basketball, I know, is my passion, and my hobby and my interest in a lot of those things, and so I want to go learn the way basketball is being taught and learned and received and executed as a program at the highest level. And for me, that's the NBA. I think that's really a hard argument that there's basketball being played at a higher level anywhere. Sure. And I didn't really want to. I'd spent an entire career in women's basketball. I wasn't as interested in taking deeper dives into women's basketball. I really wanted to see some things I hadn't seen, and study and see basketball through a different lens, and be in a room where it would not be as comfortable as it is for me to be in normally, which is men's basketball where there aren't women. There's plenty of men in women's basketball, but there are no women. Relatively speaking, there are no women. There's a handful, and that's hopefully changing in the right direction. But I just thought I really want to see how these folks communicate. I want to see how they handle adversity, how they teach. And really study the subtleties of that. Not just pop in and learn new drills or, see how many practices I can go to in a year. That wasn't my objective. I really wanted to watch great communicators teach, and really wanted to watch some of the best athletes in the world learn how to be teammates, and some of those frameworks that are really challenging that the NBA presents because of timelines and these giant contracts and just a lot of different things that we don't necessarily face in college. And was just fortunate enough that there were people like Brad Stevens and Mark Dagnall and Billy Donovan and Stan Van Gundy that gave me a chance to come and peek over their shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible opportunity. I feel like to be able to, what I heard you say was just to be able to be a little bit uncomfortable and be out of your element a little bit and find ways to learn something in a different type of population that's still doing things and doing it at a very high level, obviously, but to be able to put yourself in a little bit different shoes there and be a little bit more uncomfortable in order to learn some new things. Can you walk us through what that journey, I think I put the title on here so that I would get the mileage right, but it was that Next Step article was 365 days and 23,273 miles later.
Yeah, that's probably cutting it a little bit short, but that was just the big trips. But tried to go to a lot of clinics and things like that. But the biggest chunk of time was spent with the Boston Celtics and with them, with training camp in the middle and then a week on the front and the back where just watching workouts and practices and going to meetings and that sort of thing. And that was a drive from Florida. We didn't really think, because it was going to be about a 5 or 6 week window, that didn't make sense to fly up, rent a car. That just, let's take our time and drive up. And so that's what we did. And stayed with friends along the way. You know, I have a really good friend who was the head coach at Princeton. She's now the head coach at North Carolina. We spent some time there with her and on their campus. But ended up at Boston, and then drove from Boston down to Nashville. I should back up. While I was in Boston, though, one of the other things that I tried to do is, when the Celtics had a day off, then I would try to go and watch someone else practice. And so I watched Northeastern's men's practice. I went down and did watch UConn's women's practice one day, and Barbara Stevens at Bentley, I watched them practice. So I tried to squeeze in as much college basketball as I could in there as well, relative to the area that I was in. But then drove from there to Nashville, which is, Mount Juliet, where my family is. And while I was in Nashville, watched Vanderbilt's women's practice, went and watched Belmont's men practice. Rick Byrd, who's a famous coach on the men's side, actually just retired this year, and so got to watch practice with him and eat lunch with him. And you know, and I can keep on going on the individual breakdown. That kind of gets boring after a while. But one of the things that I think I got better at along that journey was trying to ask good questions, you know, and so that I could extract from the conversation things that you know, would help me continue to grow, and then also, so the person, whoever I was watching practice or spending time with in their office or whatever, would also feel like, you know, maybe I was challenging them in the way to kind of think about what they were doing or whatever. But drove from Nashville then to Oklahoma City and spent training camp with Oklahoma City Blue. Mark Dagnall was the head coach there, and bounced back and forth a little bit, and watched the Thunder work out a few times and talked to some of their coaches, spent a little bit of time with Billy. Left Oklahoma, and then we drove to the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and Dr. Majette was working there with their softball team, and so I got to spend some time with their men's coach there, Lenny Acuff, who just phenomenal Division II coach, who has recently become the head men's coach at David Lipscomb in Nashville. Learned a lot from him, and then we went from there. I can't remember if we went to Charlotte or if we went back to Florida, but there was also a trip to Charlotte. Got to watch the Hornets practice a few times. Also went up and watched Davidson's men's team practice. Coach McKillop he's another just legendary coach. Also spent some time with the Orlando Magic. Have a good friend, his name is Jay Hernandez, and he was an assistant coach there at the time. And Coach Vogel was also very generous with his time and allowing me to come in and watch. He's now the new head coach of the Lakers, as that coaching carousel continues to turn. And Jay is now an assistant coach with the Charlotte Hornets. So that's just kind of the nature of it. Like so, you know, all right, we're in Charlotte. All right, maybe I can watch the Hornets practice. I may find someone who knows someone who'll, you know, make a call and get me connected, and that happened a lot. But then while I was there, tried to spend time, you know, like I said, ran up to Davidson and watched them practice, because Coach McKillop, like I said, is a legend. So that was kind of the framework in which everything was built. Was whenever we traveled somewhere, who's in that area, you know, that I can watch or sit down and have a conversation with, try to ask some good questions, take a bunch of notes.
I mean, that sounds like an incredible journey,
so
honestly.
Fun. It was so fun.
So, I mean, obviously, Brad Stevens, high-level coach, the Thunder, there's a lot of names in there that are amazing coaches. Like, what are some things that you feel like you took from the way in which they lead their programs and operate? You know,
the most common string between all of them, the thread that connected all of them, whether it was Brad or Billy or Mark or Barbara Stevens or Gino at UConn or whatever, was just each one of them was so very different. You know, Bob McKillop, there was no one who was like Bob McKillop at all. You know, Lenny Acuff, there was no one that I talked to. It was like they were so unique and individual, yet they were so dialed in to exactly who they were. And that was completely the basis from which how they communicated, how they interacted with their teams on the court. They were just very genuine, and there was a true spirit of authenticity that I think made them not just good communicators, but also drew their team and their staffs to them even more, which is probably why they are so successful. I mean, there's knowledge there and there's strategy there, and you know, Stan Van Gundy's brain to me was like a database. Like, I just couldn't believe how much stuff was in his brain, but he was very genuinely himself, whether it was a staff meeting or whether it was a team workout. And I think we're all drawn to that. I think that's a very attractive quality in anybody. Sure. And so that was one of the definite like commonalities between all of those heavy hitters and, you know, the big names, and maybe not even the big names, but still really successful people that I got a chance to watch.
Yeah. No, and that's great. Like you said, I think people are drawn to things that seem authentic, things that seem real.
Very real.
You know, I feel like a lot, like everyone, whether it's someone leading a sport program or leading a business or leading a group of people in any kind of way, there can be that tendency, that pressure to want to like fit a certain mold, right? And be able to identify what it is that makes me authentic and makes me lead in the best way possible. Like, that's a huge win. That's a huge lesson to learn and understand that self-awareness of who am I when I'm at my best.
Definitely. You know, I think that was the thing that was the most powerful, was that authenticity. And so then it begs, leads to other questions of like, so then how am I developing who I am? And, you know, and how am I as an individual raising my own level of self-awareness, and how important it is to invest time in that.
Yeah.
You know, how important things like reflection are, and being able to have people in your life who help you see your blind spots, and who will tell you when you're out of line, or who also will be like, man, that's amazing. I've never heard anything like that before. You know, there were just so many good lessons in that. Definitely. But they all were really, really good communicators as well, but so different in the ways that they communicate. But that communication style, again, whether you could draw a direct line to who they were and how comfortable they were in their own skin and their own teaching style and the messages that they were delivering.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine, I don't want to assume, but I can imagine that then has transpired into this past year in the way that you have been intentional with coaching too. Like, how do you feel like you've been able to take that and be more of an authentic leader, more authentic in the way that you communicate with the team? How has that shaped you in your coaching now?
You know, I think that it was an area of my coaching where I was maybe already striving to be that way, and I think it just reinforced how important it was, and then how intentional I had to be in terms of maybe like a weekly schedule of still making sure that not only was I just being real whenever there was a conversation to be had, whether it was one-on-one with a player or in a practice setting or a film session, but also really carving out time in our week where we were dedicating time to learning how to raise self-awareness within our team, individually and collectively, and that I, as the leader, was just making those type things important, like that those things were just as important as, you know, what's the defense we're going to run, you know, in our game on Thursday.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, there were things that I would say maybe I was already dabbling in, that when I saw that in, in action, that it made it even more important for me to make those like standards of how we operated and goals of things that I really wanted the women that I get a chance to coach and lead to teach, and for them to know about themselves, how powerful self-awareness is.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that I really, really like, and I heard this a few years back, and it was at a leadership conference one of my friends invited me to, but authenticity is your greatest competitive advantage. And and that's what we have to leverage.
Yeah.
But if you're not sure of who you are, or if you question who you are, or if who you are changes, which I think speaks to the consistency factor, then you're losing a competitive advantage, whether it's work or basketball or whatever it may be. And so just really trying to be consistent and very open about who I am and what I believe, and be really direct in the way that I was communicating with this new group of women. Yeah. Of, okay, here's how I see it. I might be right or wrong, but here's how I see it. Just so you know, this is how I see it. And, if you want to have a conversation about how I see it, then great. Or if you want to challenge me on how I see it too, also good. Yeah. But I just tried to be a really direct and open communicator because this was also the very beginning of something. And I think the thing that gets lost, I'm not going to get on my soapbox about this, as being a new coach in a place sometime, is that even though I'm at the beginning of a brand new journey, there were individuals on our team who were at the end of their journey here at Clemson. And I didn't want their experience in any way, shape, or form to be diminished by my long-term goals of what I wanted to accomplish, or what I think we can accomplish at Clemson. I really wanted to make sure that we began well.
Yeah.
And when you go all the way back to, the beginning of the story that we talked about, me getting fired, I felt like that was something that was really, really important for me too, was to begin that journey well. And I thought here, with a new journey, which wasn't adversity, it was this really positive, awesome opportunity, we needed to begin well.
Sure.
And I think, being direct and treating the players with a tremendous amount of respect for where they were at in their journey, not diminishing at all, like, this is your last year. The expectations weren't that high. It would have been really easy to kind of go a direction of like, well, we just need to work on getting players here, and we just need to recruit, and we just need to get better for the future. I didn't feel like that was the right way to go. I thought that, as a new coach, we needed to begin well here, and that was really by honoring every single one of the members of our team, regardless of whether they were a freshman or sophomore, junior, and then definitely our seniors, by trying to maximize every second and that we had together. And, and like I said, just make sure through all of that there was a great deal of openness and direct communication, and even a little bit of, kind of partnering in this journey together. And that was another thing that the NBA does a really good job of. The coach-player dynamic is much more of a partnership dynamic than it is in college, and I think we're definitely in college moving towards that.
Sure.
Some of that is because it's being legislated, but I also just think that's a positive step in in the evolution of our profession.
Yeah.
Is partnering more with our student athletes, as opposed to, you've got this hierarchy where the head coach is at the top and is like the ruler, and everybody, just does what he or she says, and that's kind of historically how it's been. But I think that's shifting, and I think it's shifting in a really positive way.
So on that note, I think we have a lot of listeners that are both in the sport world and corporate world and leading in a lot of different avenues. Like for you, the takeaways that you were seeing from the NBA, like what do you feel like were the main things that you took away just as a leader in general?
Well, that partnership, just how powerful that can be when it's coupled with good communication and consistency, and just a tremendous amount of clarity. I recently heard a quote that I think really distilled that notion a lot clearer than I could with my words previously. But the higher the level of clarity of the vision, there's going to be a direct correlation to the quality of the action that follows that. And so I wanted to generate as much clarity around how we thought we could be good here. And and so that clarity is something, and there's that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, I think, in the NBA game. They're very concise with their language. They're very efficient with their players' time. And they really maximize practice time because they don't have much of it in the NBA. They play a whole lot more games than they have practices. But I thought those were things that, we could pick some little pieces out of that and apply to the way we wanted to move forward as hopefully good college coaches. That was one of the notions. And I think one of the more powerful things that, because of that time constraint dynamic that exists in the NBA, where you have a few practices and a whole bunch of games, is that they never limit their players. In terms of what they expect them to know, or what they expect, how quickly they expect them to acquire a new skill, or learning a new play, or a new strategy. You just roll it out there, and you expect them to consume it, and then be able to go out and execute it with very little turnaround time. And I know I'm not trying to speak for other college coaches, but I know very often in my journey, we have this our model is we have a whole lot of time to practice, and then we play a few games.
Sure. Yeah.
And because of that, we spend so much time in practice. Somehow along the way, because we have more time, we sometimes limit our players. And the best example I can give you of that is we always have an exam break in December, and because you don't play games during exam break. And so as a coach, you kind of have this long range planning at the beginning of the season. You think, all right, during the exam break, we'll introduce this new defense, or we'll start, here's this new layer of our offense that we'll put in. And invariably for me, I would get to exam week and I would think, we can't do that. We don't have enough time, or we're not ready, or we're not even doing A well enough yet. How can we move on to B? And that's just not really the way that, what I witnessed anyway, the way that they're teaching in the NBA. They're going, here's what we need to do to win on Thursday. So we're going to do this in this walkthrough on Thursday morning and expect you to be able to do it in the game on Thursday evening. And that was one of the things that I really also took away. I didn't want to limit my players going forward with small thinking on my part. I wanted to be really open-minded to what their highest capacity was, and that didn't mean that everything that we thought we should teach or put in was going to be absorbed and be able to execute as quickly as they do in the NBA. But at the same time, I did not want to be the reason why we couldn't be adding more layers or adding more defenses or out of bounds plays or whatever it may be.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great point, especially because I know we have some corporate leaders where they get a very limited amount of time with whoever they're managing. And so just being able to be very clear and clarify what the message is and the expectation of, I have this very high standard of what is to be then performed after that. So being able to be very clear in that message is definitely a big takeaway that I think is a huge learning point, right?
I got to watch it in action. I mean, and things they always say, like necessity is always what drives invention and things like that. And it was necessary for those men, and some of them young men, to be able to join a team or in a walkthrough be introduced to what the game plan was. Not having a practice, not 2 practices, not a week, but a walkthrough where you're not even taped or actually going through things at full speed and saying, this is what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to guard a player like Harden or Curry or whatever. This is what we're going to do. And you don't get 100 practices to try to get it right. You just have to say, here's the idea, take it, execute it, go. And I think they have more success because they have to.
Yeah.
And if you can't execute it, well, then you don't get to play.
Right.
And everybody wants to play.
Right. Right.
So there was some necessity and there's some survival that I think really elevates those guys' level of learning, because they have to.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of clarity, I think that's something in being able to be a little bit more intimate into this program. I think that was something that stood out to me, was just how clear the vision is, how clear the mission is, how clear the standards are and the expectation and what exists in laying out this program. So for you coming into Clemson, like, what was it that you were looking for in a staff and building a team in order to make sure that lived and breathed here in the culture?
I think the first place that I should start is, what kind of led me to Clemson, when I knew there was interest, and then got a chance to sit down with, Dan Radakovich and Stephanie Ellison. Basically there were 2 things that I wanted to know as the potential future leader, and that was that I was going to be well led, and that basketball was going to be important here.
Yeah.
And really, I felt like anything other than that, we could figure it out. But if there was going to be good leadership for me, I want to be well led as well. I don't want to just be a good leader. I think good leaders want good leadership. I wanted to be well led, and I wanted basketball to be important, and I definitely felt that here. With our team and then with our staff, there's 2 things that, again, just trying to keep it really, really simple, but also be really, really clear. I want to know that I can trust you, and I want to know how hard you'll work for me. And I'm always going to do my dead level best to show you that you can trust me, and that I'm going to work really hard for you. And then I think we can figure out everything in between.
Yeah.
In terms of forming a staff, I think they had to understand that about me. And then the other big kind of pillar, foundational message and core value, culture, we kind of name our culture, I don't know exactly, but we call it TLC, and that's trust, loyalty, and commitment. And those are the 3 components that, we kind of ask our team to operate by, and it was the same when I was selecting a staff. Trust is that's about the relationship component, how we're going to treat each other. Answering the question, what does love require of me? All those things, as coaches in particular, that We want to love and serve our student athletes, and not just our student athletes' talent.
Yeah.
I've heard Coach Sweeney say that before, and that really resonated with me. But the loyalty component is then also finding people that want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And being loyal to Clemson, being loyal to entities like Nike that take such good care of us as well. Being loyal to our colors and really being proud to wear orange all on Fridays and orange and purple. So loyal to all those ideas that existed before us. And then lastly, then commitment to a process that differentiates us and celebrates who we are, and which kind of circles back around that whole authenticity piece. So that's what TLC was about. And so for me, creating a staff, finding people that fit into that understood the way that I see our role as coaches, that we're part of their journey, and that our jobs are really, really important. But they're also not who we are. And so people that are really good people, who are complete people, whose lives, it's real, in basketball culture, you see kids at tournaments a lot of times, they'll have a t-shirt on that says basketball's life, and it's not. So I did not want coaches who felt like basketball's life, because you make bad decisions if basketball's life.
Sure.
Life is relationship. Life is relationships, and life is love, and life is a whole lot more than just basketball. So really just wanted to create a staff of people that could appreciate those ideas, could appreciate, like I said, how hard we were going to have to work for each other, who wanted to be part of something that was bigger than themselves, who felt like, that they could complement me. I have a lot of weaknesses, so I had to find, assistant coaches that could be really strong and smarter in areas that aren't my strengths, and then just create a staff that their doors are always going to be open, and when our team walks down the hall, there's going to be one of those doors that they feel comfortable walking into to talk to about anything, whether it's my door or Shimmy's door, Daniel's door, Joy's door, Shelly's door. And so for some student athletes, that has to do with a male-female dynamic, and for some student athletes that has to do with someone, I want to talk to someone who's older and has got more wisdom, or maybe someone who's younger and, is not as far removed from their basketball career or college experience. So just kind of trying to check all of those boxes.
Well, and I think you brought up a great point too, of like basketball is not life, right?
Oh, no.
So for you, because I think we know this from experience and from research, but when we can separate what we're doing from who we are, that again goes back to the piece of being able to manage and handle some of that adversity and still solve the problem. So how do you feel like that? I'm not basketball, I'm not head coach, right?
Yeah.
I have like more to me than just what's behind my name. Like, how do you feel like that has equipped you and your staff to be able to handle some of the ups and downs of season?
Well, I mean, it's just that. There's always going to be ups and downs of the season. And even taking it back to where our conversation started, the opportunity to grow through being fired, I think as you mature, you hopefully are becoming a more complete person, and your perspective is much, much broader than just what your job is or how much money you're making or what your title is, or some of those things that can be really distracting, because those are not who you are. And if they are, well, here's the bad news. Those can be taken away.
Right.
And then who are you? You know? And so I kind of, one of the blessings of being fired is it's really equipped me to have conversations with people that probably I wasn't equipped to have those conversations with. I had one this morning with a colleague who had been fired and is trying to find her way back in.
Yeah.
And, but one of the things that I share with the people who we have that shared experience of being fired is, listen, if getting fired is the worst thing that can happen to me, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And I had so many people, and it was well-intended, and I certainly appreciated all the love and support that I got. But so many people that would say, man, you must be devastated. And I was like, I'm really, devastated is not the right word. That's not the appropriate word for this.
Sure.
Am I disappointed? Yes. I was devastated when my meemaw passed away. Two totally different things.
Yeah.
And so, but I think we have to keep things in balance. And back to kind of the fired thing too. If coaching is such an important and special profession, at the same time, it is still a profession. And so, for someone who gets fired, if You get fired from a grocery store. If you get fired from Publix, well, then you would just go down to Winn-Dixie and try to go get another job. You wouldn't say I should never work in a grocery store again. And and so that's kind of how I felt about all of that. But I think a lot of what you're talking about just goes back to what am I really in control of? And I'm not in control of whether I stay the head coach at Clemson. I have bosses, I have leadership that will make a decision about whether that's the right choice for the university or not.
Yeah.
And so I want to do a great job. I want to crush it with the things that I have control of. And then I want to just pray for enough strength that for the things that I'm not in control of, that I won't let those distract me from who I am and the things that I can make an impact on.
Yeah, and that's awesome. We talk all the time about how, high performance and focus comes from being able to focus your attention on the things that you can control.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you focus on everything else, it's just all kinds of distraction.
Easy to get distracted, and we only have so much energy.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. We only have so much energy. We think sometimes, we only have so much time, but we only have so much energy, really. And I just don't want to waste any of mine. And that was how I started my fire journey. I didn't want to waste any energy on emotions that weren't going to help me be a better person, a better mama, a better sister or partner, and all the different roles in the world that I get to hold that I think are really who I am.
Yeah.
And I think going back to your question, that's how we try to coach and lead in our program. Sometimes we can't get distracted by a loss.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can't be distracted by the scoreboard, whether it's a losing scoreboard or a winning scoreboard. All of those things can be distractions. We have to know who we are, and we got to make sure that we're pouring as much energy as we can, an appropriate amount of energy into those efforts. And then we've got to have the right amount of energy into rest and recovery, and we've got to have a right amount of energy into the relationship component of what we do. And the scoreboard and the wins and losses in our world very often can be a distraction from being the very best that you can in those other realms.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned TLC, that really being the the foundation for this program for you. Like, how did that help you then take on this new team and this new identity and be able to kind of weather those wins and losses on the board?
Well, I think that, we talked about, this is who we want to be as a program. And I think there has to be a lot of learning and a lot of education about what those words actually mean. And then what do they actually mean in this year's case for Team 44? What does that look like? They can't just be words. They can't just be slogans. They've got to be actions and action items, and they've got to be instances that you can think of and call on in your mind and know exactly what TLC is. And so we spent a whole lot of time trying to make that as clear and as real of a thing as we possibly could.
Yeah.
And then the ripple effect of that is and this is mostly the C part of it, the commitment part of it is, what are we going to be committed to? Okay, well, we're going to play this certain way, and here's the things we're going to be committed to giving energy to. And then we've got to train these unnatural skills, is what we call them, to not get distracted when we've played a really good game and we feel really good about ourselves, and we still lost by 10.
Sure.
We cannot get distracted from the process that we've said is ours, and the commitment to the things that make us us. And and so we spent a lot of time really just, I know this is just real simple, but we just spent a lot of time talking about those things. Every week we do Breakfast of Champions, as you know, and that's the time that we've carved out weekly to have conversations around things like unnatural skills and the adversity that we know is inevitable. We're not going to probably go through the season and be undefeated. Right. It happens, Clemson football, but it's historic when it happens. And so you can coach a lifetime and be a very good coach or be a very good player and still lose a lot of games. Yeah. And so we didn't want those losses or those disappointments to be the things that defined us. We wanted to be a lot more dialed in on how we competed, an exchange experience that we had with our opponents even. We wanted to create a feeling on the other side of us that was not pleasant. Yeah. And those were the things that, that we really wanted to give energy to. Yeah. And then hopefully if we do all that and we do it with consistency and we can do it with maximum effort and with great teamwork and great energy, then hopefully we're going to end up winning the game.
Yeah.
But certainly that wasn't always the case. And any coach will tell you too how powerful it is to be able to teach after a loss. And I think as a staff we did a pretty good job of trying to maximize those teaching moments as well. But just a lot of great people on this hall that I get to call my coworkers, and they make me better, and they certainly make our players better.
Yeah. And while, like you said, it's very rare and exceptional to be able to go undefeated, you'll also had a very successful year. For those that aren't fully versed on Team 44, just to highlight some of the few things. There was a first NCAA tournament appearance since 2002, first time seeded 7th in the ACC tournament since 2004, first back-to-back road wins over ranked opponents in program history, most overall wins in ACC road wins since 2001, and most home wins in ACC wins since 2002. So, how do you feel like knowing who we are, knowing what we're about, helped shape such a successful year for Team 44?
Well, I think it came down to a couple of things. I mean, they really did a very good job of giving energy to the right things. And, in the coaching world, we use the term coachable all the time. But, the better way, that just is such an oversimplification. This team just had a really uncanny ability to not care about the things that they weren't. And that may seem really easy, like, well, sure, why would you care about things that you're not? But in basketball, we had to not care about not being good shooters.
Right.
We had to not care about the fact that we really couldn't shoot from the three-point line very consistently at all. We had to not care about some of the things that are very sexy in what we do. And so that is a lot easier said than done.
Definitely.
And this team, like I said, just did a tremendous job of trusting their coaches that those were things we couldn't care about.
Yeah.
We had to care a whole lot more about our energy. We had to care a whole lot more about winning the foot race up and down the floor. And those few things that we said, these are the things that we're going to care about, they really devoted a majority of their energy to those things and then didn't get distracted by what we weren't.
Well, and you said that obviously coming off of a loss can be a real opportunity for some learning moments for you and everything that you've been through and the failure and the adversity of your journey. How do you feel like that helped shape the message when maybe the scoreboard didn't reflect what we wanted?
Yeah, I mean, again, you said this earlier on. I mean, one of the best ways to teach is to model. And I think that the most adverse part of my professional story, and now this season turning out the way that it did, has given me a great opportunity to model to my players. It's not always going to go right. But if you get distracted by that, then you got no chance. If you don't get distracted by that, then you got a pretty good chance that you can come out the other side of it in a positive way. And we don't talk about my journey or my story unless they ask questions, and that sort of thing. There's plenty that they can read or find on the internet at this point.
Yeah.
But I do believe in that, that if, for example, as a staff, and I'm very fortunate to have a pretty big staff.
Yeah.
If we want our team and our locker room to function as a team with great chemistry at a really, really high level, as a staff, we have to model that as another team. And, there's got to be respectful communication. There's got to be high-fiving. There's got to be positive energy. There's got to be a lot of hard work that our team sees in our coaches. And then I think it becomes easier to reproduce that.
Sure.
Because you're watching something that you want to model. But I think modeling is very, very powerful. And as a leader, I think that's one of the things that we've got to be really accountable for is what am I modeling?
Yeah.
And, I think, poor leadership is, it's really easy to identify on teams. We throw out things like, blame and all these other things. But in the face of a loss, the very first thing that I'm going to talk to our team about is not what we didn't do right, what I didn't do right. I should have called a timeout there. I shouldn't have made that substitution. We should not have gone to zone in the third quarter. So that they also know that when we lose, it is just that. We're losing. They didn't lose the game.
Right.
I screwed some things up as well.
Sure.
And I think taking ownership of the things that don't go well from the top, that definitely trickles down. It makes it a whole lot easier instead of saying, hey, you threw a bad pass to, I just blew it. I was open. I missed the shot. And so I think as leaders, we've got to really hold ourselves to those standards in the most trying and challenging moments the most. If we expect that from our teams.
Yeah, I think it opens the door for it to be okay to admit your faults and admit your mistakes. And like we were talking about, failure is an opportunity for growth. But if we feel like we need to have it all together all the time, then it's really hard to ever really grow in that kind of environment when mistakes are being made.
Well, what you just said is not reality, right? We have it together all the time. And so then let's connect that back to our earlier idea. There's nothing genuine about that. I've got it together all the time. And so no one's going to, over the long term, respond to that over and over again.
Right.
There's not going to be that shared experience and the power of authenticity is going to be lost if you're running around charading as if you've got the answers. And that your answers are always the right answers, and that when things go wrong, that we're going to look somewhere else besides in the mirror.
Yeah, and you talked about self-awareness being such a big highlight of what was evident in your experience in your journey. How do you feel like that self-awareness has helped you then shape the way that you coach now?
Well, I think just that, what we just talked about a second ago was, when I'm looking for how can we get better or why did we fail in terms of a win or a loss, of first just with a fine-tooth comb going through my decisions in practice, my decisions in the game, and not just decisions in terms of we should have ran this play versus that play, but like, did I handle that? Did I come into the locker room with the right energy at halftime?
Right.
Did I challenging that player directly? Was that the right move? And so I think really having that intentional time, which, I guess the easy way, that kind of reflective time at the end of a win or a loss of, before I talk to anybody else, just kind of sitting there and replaying my decisions, the things I had control over back in my head, and what did I do with those things? And then if I had it to do over again, would I use that same tone, or would I, call that same play? Whatever the case may be. But I think we do have to carve out intentional time for reflection before we're ready to talk to anyone. Because if we don't, there's also this thing called emotion, and pride that can sometimes get in the way of us having an opportunity as the leader to maybe take our self-awareness up a notch.
Right. Yeah, that reflection is so huge and so critical in order to get the message across that you're trying to, in the way that you're trying to portray it to.
Yeah, for sure.
So looking back on this whole experience with failure and adversity, what do you feel like has surprised you the most?
For example, that you want for me to be on a podcast talking about it. That is one of the things that's been really, really surprising, is just how much interest this part of my journey has generated, and how much people have wanted to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And it's very flattering, but I think it's also just the reality of, the power of, and the reality that failure is going to come, or adversity is going to come. And then just being ready for it, and how interested folks are in that idea. I think surprising, in myself was then how much I really wanted to share. I had so many people in that gap year, unplanned sabbatical, whatever you want to call it, my free agency year, where I had so many folks that would just say, hey, I really want to sit down with you at some point and talk to you about everything you learned this year. And that's kind of what led Dr. Majed and myself to write the article, was two things. There were so many people that seemed interested in what I was learning, and I really did want to share that.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was, my birthday is on March 6th. That was, as we've already discussed, the day that I got fired. That's also in the college basketball world, the time when there's always transitions, when there's new firings, and and I just thought, listen, every March 6th, there's going to be, some, or around about that time, there's going to be some folks that lose their jobs. And maybe there'll be something in this that makes them go, all right, big deal, let's move on.
Yeah.
This is a death sentence, or, devastating, or something that really is going to define who I am. But
sure.
it just becomes part of your story.
Yeah. Well, and just to be a fly on the wall in true storybook fashion, to be able to then the next year celebrate your birthday and the announcement be made that ACC Coach of the Year is indeed Amanda Butler was
crazy.
A pretty cool turnaround of events, and just to show that, failure is going to happen, but ultimately can we make the most of the journey? So that was a pretty cool thing to get to just experience as a small fly on the wall.
Very, very humbling, and just it's an awesome recognition, and but it's not named properly. Like Coach of the Year is like there's no way that there's one person whose name should be on this trophy, on this plaque or whatever. There's just so many people that make a season, a year. There's so many moving parts that I think we were much more the program of the year because it was not just me. There were so many people that contributed to the results that grabbed people's attention, and I didn't play a minute. Actually, I played in practice at the ACC tournament and not well. So those minutes. You
did hit some half court shots. Though,
I did.
If I remember.
my backwards half court shots, about the only shot that is money for me at this point. But
yes. Well, so just to kind of wrap this up, I'm big on quotes and also big on Brene Brown, and I happen to be reading her new book called Dare to Lead.
Oh,
and
I've heard about that.
Yes, it's an incredible book. I highly recommend. But I found this quote from it. When we own our hard stories and rumble with them, we can write a new ending, an ending that includes how we're going to use what we've survived to be more compassionate and empathetic. So how does this quote resonate with you and the experience that you've been through?
I think the first thought is just kind of alluded to it a little bit of having been fired. It has equipped me with a life experience to have a conversation with other people who've been fired, and there's just a lot of people who have been fired along the way, and I really kind of count that as a blessing, as a way to connect with someone who's maybe going through a hard time. And the way I kind of liken it to is like someone who's maybe struggling in their marriage or had divorce. They don't really want advice from the person who's got the perfect marriage and just this amazing looking life and have no idea what divorce is like. You really want to have a conversation with someone who understands what that feels like. And so I think that empathy and compassion comes from a really true place because I've walked in those shoes before, and so like I said, I don't look at it at all as something that's negative, I just look at it as it's part of my story. The whole March 6th thing kind of makes it a fun story to tell, but in a more powerful way, it's given me a way to connect with people who might be having a hard time, or maybe who can look at what has happened so far in my story and go, well, if she can do it, surely I can, and I'm good with that. I'm really good with that.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you connecting with our listeners as well, and it's been a real pleasure having you on. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Katie and listeners. And I think this is awesome, and just really humbling that anyone would be interested in hearing what I have to say. So I really do appreciate that. Always love talking to you and love good podcasts. So maybe this one will reach somebody's ears and make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Coach.
Go Tigers.
If you're interested in learning more about what we do, visit our website at synergyperformancesc.com. Join us next time for more relevant topics on The Growth Project.